Hello, everybody, and thanks for tuning in to Master English with Tim, the podcast where Tim teaches you English in depth and detail and without ever hurrying. I'm Tim, native speaker from the United States, English teacher since 2004, polyglot, world traveler, writer of resources for learning English, and podcaster for 97 episodes. So I want to start this week's episode with a small story about one of my students. In 2022, I got a new student, let's call him Yevgeny, who needed to pass IELTS with a 7 or better in order to live and study in Canada. Yevgeny needed to pass not just IELTS, but actually IELTS Academic, which is significantly harder than the general test, and he had only 6 or so weeks to improve his score. One of the first things I do when I help prepare people for IELTS generally is to make people do the reading test. Actually, I have each person take the same IELTS reading test twice. The first time, I ask them to take the test while respecting the 1-hour time limit and without using a dictionary. This gives me an idea of how the person might do in real test conditions. And in these conditions, Yevgeny got 4 out of a possible 9 on the reading subtest. After I ask a person to take the test while respecting the time limit, I also ask them to take the same test again using the exact same reading texts, but this time they can take as much time as they want to, and again they do it without a dictionary. Sometimes when they don't have a time limit, they need 70 minutes, sometimes 90, sometimes way more. It's really all over the place. Having students take the test without a time limit lets me know how well they read and understand when there is no time pressure. So if someone gets a low score when they have unlimited time to read and answer the questions, that usually indicates that they just don't know enough vocabulary or grammar yet to get a good score. On the other hand, if someone gets a low score when they have only 1 hour to take the test, but then a higher score when they have unlimited time, then that means that their reading comprehension is in principle good, but that something is making this comprehension happen more slowly. And coming back to Yevgeny, he got a 7.5 when there was no time limit. This was a 3.5 point difference, which was the biggest difference in scores I had ever seen, and still is the biggest difference I've ever seen today. After I saw this difference in results, I thought for a while about what could explain such a big difference. And honestly, I should have just asked Yevgeny or done a reading exercise with him together to see exactly what was happening. But instead, I decided to trust my intuition, and I told Yevgeny to very heavily study the 100 most used words of English and their many meanings using a dictionary I had written on this topic. Yevgeny wasn't really crazy about this idea, but I really strongly suggested it anyways. He studied the 100 most used words like with, at, get, like, and have, and when he was done, I asked him to do it again. He did tell me that he had seen all the words in the list before, of course, but that at the same time, often the words had meanings that he didn't know or that he did know but was unsure about. So the second time that he went through the list, he was much faster with it. And then, after he was done going through the top 100 words a second time, I asked him to retake the reading test, but this time without a timer. Actually, he needed to do it in 60 minutes, just like on the real test. So he took the test again, and he got a 7.5. Now, I wanted to check and make sure that this result, going from a 4 to a 7.5, was not some kind of crazy accident, so I asked Yevgeny to take more reading tests with the 60-minute time limit, and the result was pretty similar. He always got a 7, a 7.5, or even an 8. Now, I don't want to say that by studying the first 100 words, that everyone will greatly increase their reading comprehension and be able to get a higher score on IELTS reading. Because in reality, Yevgeny's case, where studying 100 words brought his score up by 3 points, was not typical. But at the same time, his case does show just how important those 100 words are and that they have a disproportionate impact on people's understanding when they read and also when they listen. And for that reason, I am going to focus today on just one of those 100 words. The word I'm going to focus on for the rest of the episode is at. Yes, that's right, at, with just 2 letters in it, A-T. At, however, has around 9 meanings in 3 different categories, and I'm going to explain every one of those meanings from each of those categories. And while I'm sure that you know some or even most of them, I'm also pretty sure that some meanings and some details of meanings will be surprising for you. Before we get started, let me tell you the 3 categories of meaning that at is used in. At is used to talk about location or where something is, and to talk about movement, and finally to talk about time. And honestly, this is a pretty big episode with a lot of detail in it, so you might want to listen to it over a couple of days. It's your decision though. So let's get started with the biggest category, which is location. At has 4 meanings when talking about location. So let's start with the first meaning. And actually, there is a lot to know about this one. This is the most complicated meaning of the whole episode. So let's get working. So if a person says that they are at the supermarket, where is the person? Is the person inside the supermarket or outside of it? For example, in the parking lot? Or could it be either one? Well, the answer is that it could be either one. They could be inside or they could be in the parking lot, very close to the building. So now I will give you the first formal definition of at. The first meaning of at is inside or next to a place that was built by people. We already talked about the inside or next to part of the definition, so now let's look at the part that says built by people. So here is a list of things built by people with at. So, at an office, and when I say office, I don't mean a room where people work, but rather a big building which is full of those rooms. So again, at the office, and you can be at an office complex, at a store, at a market, at a supermarket, at a car repair shop, at an apartment, at a house, at a factory, at a post office, at a stadium, at a gym. Also, you can be at a park. Now, a park is somehow between nature and man-made, so you can say at a park or in a park. Both are okay. Actually, I said that there are 2 parts of this definition, but I need to add a third one. So we already said that at means inside or next to a place that was built by people. But we need to add something. We need to say that usually, but not always, the person who is at an office or at a factory or at wherever is involved in some kind of activity. So if you're at your office, you might be playing cards with your colleagues, but probably you're working. If you're at a stadium, you're probably there to watch a game or maybe even play in one. And if somebody is at the supermarket, probably they are there shopping. So okay, our definition of at, which is inside or next to a place that was built by people, usually while doing an activity, this definition is complete. We don't need to add anything to the definition. But there are 2 kind of special cases connected with this meaning where the use of the words is a little bit different than what a lot of people would expect. The first special case or detail is that there are quite a few nouns that are used with at without an article. So we say at home, at work, at school, at college, at university. We also have 3 more nouns used without an article and with at. So, at church, for Christians on Sundays, at temple, for Jewish people on Saturdays, and at mosque, for Muslims on Fridays. Now, the second special case or detail about how to use at is when we say that we are in or next to someone's house. And when we do that, we can use that person's name with an apostrophe and an S if we're talking about the written form. For example, I can say, we're at Dave's house. Or I can also just leave out the word house and say, we're at Dave's. Another example, I left my backpack at Kathy's yesterday. So, I left my backpack at Kathy's yesterday means I left my backpack at Kathy's house yesterday. This construction with just the name and the apostrophe S. I left my backpack at Kathy's yesterday, or we're at Dave's. This construction might sound a bit surprising, so let me just give you some more phrases. At John's, at Aaron's, at Tim's, at Michelle's, at Kevin's, and so on. Also, maybe you didn't know, but sometimes we put two or more people's names together and put an apostrophe and S only on the last name that we say. For example, if Dan and Jason live together and are going to have a party, you can say, "Are you going to the party at Dan and Jason's tomorrow night?" Could you say at Dan's and Jason's? Yes, you could, but in reality, what most people say most of the time is at Dan and Jason's tomorrow night. So, okay, that honestly was a lot for just one meaning of at, but now it is behind us. We're done with that meaning. And everything else will be significantly easier than that. And we are now ready to move on to the second definition of at for talking about location. This meaning is very similar to the last one. In the definition that I'm going to tell you, someone or something is in or next to something. But instead of being in or next to things built by people, we are talking about being in or next to bodies of water. So if you're at a lake, it means that you are in the water, or maybe on a boat, or maybe next to the lake, like on a beach there, and probably doing an activity that's connected with being at a lake, like swimming or fishing or barbecuing or whatever. And by the way, we have a specific word for a small lake. A small lake, like one that's maybe only 30 meters wide or so, is called a pond. So let's do 3 examples with this meaning of at, where you are in or right next to a body of water. So 3 examples. 1, the men are fishing at the pond. 2, we're going to barbecue at the lake this weekend. Want to come? 3rd and last, we have a vacation house at Lake Michigan that we visit every summer. Now let's continue with bodies of water, but this time we'll talk about bodies of water that move. So you can also be at a river, and you can be at a smaller river. We have 2 words in English for smaller rivers. So you can be at a creek, that's C-R-E-E-K, and you can be at a stream, that's S-T-R-E-A-M. So a creek and a stream, those are really like small rivers, anywhere from a couple of meters up to maybe 15 meters wide. So yes, you can be at a creek or at a stream. 3 more examples. 1, the kids are at the creek catching frogs. 2, they're at the stream catching turtles. 3rd and last, where's Jane? Oh, she's at the river relaxing with her friends. Now, similarly, you can be at the beach or at the seaside. Now, you might say, wait a minute, the beach and the seaside, those are not bodies of water. They're made out of dirt and sand. And you know what? You're right. But they are related to bodies of water, and the idea of being at the beach or at the seaside will help us transition to the next definition of this week's target preposition, at. So the third function of at for talking about location is to say that someone or something is located on the extreme part or on the edge of something. The edge of an object is the part of something that is farthest from the center. So if your cup full of hot coffee is at the edge of the table, then the cup is not in the middle of the table. Instead, your cup is at the end of the table where it could easily fall from the table and down onto the floor. So that's what the edge is. So let's talk more about the edges or extreme parts of places. So we can say at the edge of a cliff, at the bottom of the sea, at the top of a mountain, at the top of a tree, and so on. We can also say that a student graduated at the bottom of their class, or at the top of their class. You can even use it with time, at the beginning of the year, at the beginning of a movie, at the end of the year, at the end of the movie. Let me give you 3 example sentences with this meaning of at. 1, my hopes are at the bottom of the sea. 2, we took pictures at the top of the mountain. 3rd and last, I like to stand at the edge of cliffs and look down. We have a fourth and last meaning of at for talking about location. In this meaning, we say that someone is present at an event. So you can be at a meeting, at lunch, at dinner, at a concert, at a protest, at a demonstration, at an exhibition, at a game, or at a play. When we say play, we don't mean like a baseball game or a football game. We mean a play in the theater. For example, Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare is an example of a play. Let's do 5 examples with this meaning of at, where a person is present at an event. 1. He's at a meeting until 4 p.m. 2. I'm at a concert. I'll write you later. 3. Where's Chris? He's at a baseball game. 4. He can't talk to you right now. He's at lunch. 5th and last. Let's talk about it at lunch tomorrow. Now, I think some people thought during those 5 examples, hey, wait a second, can't you also say in a game or in a concert? Well, yes, you can, but if a person is at a game, they are watching that game. And if they are in a game, they are playing in it. They are part of the game itself. Similarly, if a person is at a concert, they're listening to it. And if they're in a concert, they are playing an instrument. Okay, that's all of the meanings, all 4 of them, of at for location. Now we're ready for the next category of meaning for at. That category is movement, and there is only one meaning in it. So we use at with verbs that talk about direct, linear movement. 2 verbs illustrate this really well. The first one is to shoot at something. So if you shoot, I don't know, for example, an arrow at a paper target, you can see how the arrow flies in a line towards the target. If you say, I shot the arrow at the target, does that mean that the arrow in fact touched the target? Is the answer yes, no, or maybe? Think about it for a second. I shot the arrow at the target. Well, the right answer is maybe. We don't know if the arrow hits the target or not. It depends on the context and information that you get a little bit later. Another verb that uses at in this same meaning of linear motion is throw. So if you, for instance, throw an apple at someone, that means that you want the apple to hit the person, for example, in the head. Not a very nice thing to do. This is very different from throwing an apple to someone. So when you throw an apple to someone, the goal of your action is for the other person to catch the apple in their hand. So throw at is violent and throw to is not. Some other verbs with this kind of linear movement meaning of at are look at someone, stare at someone. So when you stare at someone, you continually look at the person and maybe you don't even close your eyes. Usually it's rude to stare at someone. So look at someone, stare at someone, shout at someone, yell at someone. Yell is a synonym of shout. So shout at someone, yell at someone, and scream at someone. 5 examples of at with verbs that have to do with linear movement. 1. Why are you yelling at me? 2. Please stop shouting at me. 3. She got angry at me and threw an apple at me. 4. They put bottles on the wall and shot their pistols at them. 5th and last. I went to the bookstore and looked at some books, but didn't buy anything. Okay, that's all for at with movement, so we are ready for our last category, which is for talking about time. And in this category, we have 5 meanings, but actually they are pretty simple compared to what I've talked about already. Let's do our first meaning of at for time. Earlier, when I was talking about at for physical locations, I explained how at is used to talk about edges or extreme parts of something, and that we can use at to talk about edges in time, that is the beginning of something and the end of something. So you can say at the beginning and at the end. 3 examples. 1. Everyone dies at the end of the movie. 2. I fell asleep at the beginning of the flight. 3rd and last. You can ask questions at the end of the meeting. So we also use at, this is the next meaning, the second meaning, to talk about specific times of day. So at 10 a.m., at 12 p.m., at midday, at noon, at 3 p.m., at midnight. 3 examples. 1. We will meet at 2 o'clock. 2. The meeting starts at 6:15. Third and last. The train arrives at noon. So the third meaning of at is with the word night. We say in the morning, in the afternoon, but we say at night. At night just means during the night. 3 examples. 1. I have my best ideas at night. 2. Vampires party and drink blood at night. Third and last, I can't sleep at night when I drink too much coffee. The fourth meaning of at is to say at what age an event happened in a person's life. Again, 3 examples. 1. She got married at 34. 2. In the United States, you can drive a car at 16. Third and last, she got her first job at 14. Okay, now we are ready for the fifth and last meaning or function of at. In British English specifically, at is used with the word weekend. In the US, we say on the weekend, but in Britain, they say at the weekend. 3 examples. 1. No one likes to work at weekends. 2. What are you doing at the weekend? Third and last. She learned Spanish by studying it at weekends. Okay, that's all the most important meanings of at. I hope that this episode added detail to your understanding of this very important word. Thank you for listening, and see you all next Monday.